Welcome back to Roadmap. Last year, the government in the Dominican Republic passed the law requiring foreign-born workers to register with the government or face deportation. Now that the deadline to apply for legal status expired, thousands of undocumented migrant workers, the majority of them Haitians, could be deported by the end of the summer. But the actual number of migrants that could be deported is unclear. A survey conducted by the United Nations estimates that there are more than 540,000 foreign-born workers in the country, 90% of them from Haiti. So far, the Dominican government says that out of the 240,000 applicants it received, it only granted residency permits to 300 people. The government says the move is a way of fixing their broken immigration system, but this is a more complex problem with deeper roots. In 2013, a constitutional court ruled that people born inside the Dominican Republic of Haitian descent were no longer citizens. The court ruling left thousands of Dominicans stateless.
Nos llevaron en la frontera, nos pusieron en fila y nos cruzaron el puente. Si te ven negro, y ya tú eres haitiano. Ellos no toman en cuenta que uno nació aquí y nada.
Now, many critics say both the immigration law and the court ruling are racist and illegal, and several international organizations, including the United Nations, have called on the Dominican government to stop the mass deportation of workers and the citizens. Joining me now to discuss this are Wade McMullen, managing editor for Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, and from Human Rights Watch, researcher Celso Perez. Thank you both for joining us. Celso, let me start beginning. You were just telling me before you joined us that you spent most of your this past year in Dominican Republic and research and following the situation. Give us a sense of how grim the situation is for these folks. What is the sense of anxiety among the people down there? And how would even the government begin to execute a deportation on this mass scale?
So I think that brief clip you showed really illustrates the problem and the situation right now. Essentially, the deportation protocols that are in place are what that man was describing. That was an interview I conducted while I was down there. And essentially what is happening is people are being stopped on the street in their communities because of the way they look. There's an assumption that people are quote-unquote Haitian or Haitian-looking.
So they're profiling, a bit of a racial profile.
A bit of a racial profiling, and then there's very little process happening. So essentially people are detained, they're put onto trucks. There's really no deportation or no holding center to speak of. They're essentially taken to the border, and then families have to rush to the border with identification cards or to somehow prove that their family members are in fact Dominican and should remain in the country.
But even in the case of some of these Dominicans that are of Haitian ancestry, are they still able, if they prove that they were born in the country, allowed to stay, or are they still being forcibly...
It's a case-by-case situation. That man in the video, Wilson, was actually deported. He spent a day in Haiti, and then he was allowed to return. In the case of migrants, what you've had is, as you mentioned, there's been a process to regularize migration.
Yeah.
But even people that have been going through this process, that have it's a receipt really that they get from the government saying, we're processing your application, are also being rounded up and deported with those receipts.
Mr. McMullen, if I can bring you in here, I mean, the Dominican government says that it's doing this to tackle its immigration problem, that it has a chronic immigration problem, and trying to get illegal immigrants, as they see them, or migrant workers out of their country, this is the only solution they have before the numbers become even worse. What do you say to that from a human rights perspective?
Well, from a human rights perspective, it's extremely problematic. But I think I would just start practically speaking. The government's shooting themselves in the foot here. The Chamber of Commerce, the workers' groups, everyone is saying that deporting migrant workers from the Dominican Republic, upon which their economy relies extremely heavily, is going to result in an economic downturn. I mean, this is a place where the tourism industry, the construction industry, the textile and garment industry relies a lot on Dominicans of Haitian descent and Haitian migrants who are the backbone of these industries for the country. What we're seeing now, I think, is a lot of political posturing. I mean, this is a community where we have government officials and populism that has routinely scapegoated the community of Haitians and Haitian descendants in the Dominican Republic. And right now, the government officials who are putting forth these policies, they're trying to put forth a policy that makes them look good at the international level and passing what in theory could be comprehensive immigration reform and could really benefit the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of migrants living in the country and their own citizens who are denationalized.
Yeah.
But in effect, they never wanted this to work.
But can you give
and
us
if they had wanted it to work, it would have looked completely different.
Can you give us the political context in which the government, I mean, as you mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce there and other labor organizations are saying this is bad for the Dominican Republic going forward, economically, as you mentioned, for various industries. So under what guise is the political leadership of the country arguing that this is good for the country?
I mean, it comes down to basic political scapegoating. On the playgrounds of the Dominican Republic, the term Haitian is thrown around as a derogatory term. That, you know, for years and years and years, dating back to the 1930s, there's been a lot of tension between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. The dictator at the time in the Dominican Republic ordered the massacre of thousands of Haitians along the border in the late 1930s. And there's this animus that has grown in society that is very much a part of the DNA towards Haitians. It's a xenophobic sentiment that, that is easy for politicians to play upon. And right now what we have is going into elections, there's not a political party or a political leader who's willing to stand up and say that we're going to do the right thing, we're going to abide by international law, we're going to protect the rights of migrants, we're going to restore the citizenship of the Dominicans who were denationalized illegally by the courts, because they're afraid of their opponent pandering to this populist sentiment and losing the ultra-nationalist right-wing vote.
And you're shaking your head in agreement with this. Politically speaking, the Dominican government still, from the Haitian perspective, treats its citizens, at least in that country, as second-class citizens to some extent. What is it going to take to change that? Do you need to have a more education campaign or awareness, or what is it going to be to try to level the human rights playing field there?
Certainly. Well, I think two things. First, I think that the government does deserve some credit for what it did last year. So, as you said, it did pass a law. This could have been a lot worse, and it was certainly a step in the right direction. I think that the bottom line is it's not enough.
Yeah.
What has happened has been, there's been a process in place. Some people have been able to get their documents back and have been able to, others haven't. And same goes with the regulatory process for migrants. Some have been able to access the process. The government still has not given final responses. At the same time, trying to cram this all in a period of a year is just not feasible and is not really going to solve the situation.
And what happens to the hundreds of thousands who are being sent back to Haiti? I mean, some of their families are still behind.
Yeah, I think that's something we'll find out in the next couple weeks.
Could that be a destabilizing factor on the border between those two?
Certainly, certainly.
Great, guys. Celso Perez and McMullen, thank you both for joining us. We're going to have to leave it at that. You're watching Roadmap on Shift.